The billionaire's fiancée humiliated the waitress so badly that the whole restaurant stopped eating. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Wine glasses paused in the air. Even the pianist in the corner missed a note. At the center table near the glass wall, Victoria Ashford stood in a white designer dress, one hand on her hip, the other pointing at a young waitress who looked like she wanted the floor to open and hide her. The waitress's name was Amara. Her hands were shaking around an empty serving tray. A red sauce stain spread across the front of Victoria's dress, not huge, but visible enough to make the woman furious and rich enough to make everyone else afraid. Victoria's voice cut through the restaurant like broken glass. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs?" Amara swallowed. "Ma'am, I am so sorry, the tray slipped when—" "I did not ask for excuses," Victoria snapped. The restaurant manager hurried over, pale and nervous. "Miss Ashford, please, we will handle this." Victoria turned on him too. "You better handle it, because if this little girl is still working here by the end of the night, I will make sure no serious person ever eats in this place again." Little girl. Amara was not a little girl. She was 24, exhausted, proud, and trying very hard not to cry in front of people who had paid more for dinner than she made in 2 weeks. At the table sat Victoria's fiancé, Alexander Vale. Billionaire. Hotel owner. Real estate king. The kind of man whose name appeared on buildings, business magazines, charity gala invitations, and whispered conversations in rooms where ordinary people were only allowed to serve. He had been quiet since the accident happened. Too quiet. Victoria seemed to take that silence as permission. She stepped closer to Amara. "Look at me when I speak to you." Amara lifted her eyes. Victoria smiled cruelly. "That is better. You people always act so invisible until you ruin something expensive." A low murmur moved through the room. Someone looked away. Someone else looked down at their plate. The manager whispered, "Miss Ashford, please." But Victoria was not finished. She picked up the stained cloth napkin from the table and dropped it at Amara's feet. "Clean it." Amara stared at the napkin. So did everyone else. The manager froze. Victoria's friends at the table gave uncomfortable little laughs, the kind people use when cruelty is happening too close to them and they do not want to choose a side. Victoria's voice lowered, but it somehow became sharper. "Pick it up." Amara bent slowly. Not because she wanted to. Because she needed the job. Because her little brother's school fees were due. Because rent was 3 days late. Because her mother's medicine had doubled in price. Because people with money often know the poor cannot afford dignity in public. Her fingers touched the napkin. That was when Alexander Vale stood up. His chair moved back with a soft scrape. The restaurant went completely silent. Victoria smiled at him, expecting him to rescue her from embarrassment. "Alexander, finally, tell them this is unacceptable." Alexander did not look at the manager. He did not look at the other guests. He looked at Amara, still bent toward the floor with her hand on the napkin. Then he said, "Please stand up." His voice was calm. Not loud. But it carried through the room. Amara froze. Slowly she stood. Alexander looked at Victoria. "Apologize to her." Victoria blinked. "What?" "I said apologize." Her smile disappeared. "Alexander, she ruined my dress. And you just tried to ruin her dignity." The silence in the restaurant changed. It became heavy. Victoria laughed once, but it came out thin. "You cannot be serious." "I am very serious." "Over a waitress." Alexander's face hardened. "Over a person." The word landed like a slap. Victoria looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware that everyone was watching her now, not Amara. "Alexander, you are embarrassing me." "No," he said, "you did that yourself." Then he turned to the manager. "This young woman will not be fired. Her shift ends now, with full pay for the night and a written note that this incident was not her fault." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Vale." Victoria's face went red. "You do not get to make decisions for this restaurant." Alexander looked at her calmly. "I own the building." The room seemed to inhale at once. Victoria's mouth opened. No sound came out. Alexander reached into his jacket and removed the small velvet box that had been sitting in his pocket all night. The engagement ring inside was worth more than Amara's mother's house. Victoria stared at the box. Her expression shifted. Hope, fear, confusion. Alexander closed it again. "I brought this here tonight because I was going to announce our wedding date." Victoria's eyes widened. "Alexander, but I needed to see something first." Her voice dropped. "See what?" "Who you are when the person in front of you has nothing you want." That was when everyone understood. This dinner had not only been a celebration. It had been a test. And Victoria Ashford had failed before dessert. "Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever seen someone powerful treat a weaker person badly, stay with this story. Because sometimes character is not revealed in how people speak to kings. It is revealed in how they treat the person carrying the tray." Alexander Vale had spent his whole life being watched. Not in the way ordinary people are watched. Ordinary people are watched when they make mistakes. Alexander was watched even when he smiled, walked into a room, shook hands, bought coffee, chose a tie, or stood near a window at a charity event. People watched him because he was worth billions. They watched him because his father had built the Vale Hospitality Group from one failing seaside motel into a luxury hotel empire spread across 4 continents. They watched him because money creates a strange kind of theater where people clap before the show even begins. But Alexander had not always been rich. That was the part people forgot. His father, Dominic Vale, had started as a dishwasher in a hotel kitchen. His mother, Elena, cleaned rooms on the 5th floor of the same hotel. They met near the laundry carts, married in a courthouse, and raised Alexander in a small apartment behind the service entrance. For the first 9 years of his life, Alexander did not know his family was poor. He only knew his mother smelled like soap and lavender. He knew his father came home late with tired feet. He knew hotel kitchens were warm, loud, and full of people who spoke different languages but shared food like family. He knew the women who cleaned rooms were the first people to know when rich guests were lonely, careless, kind, cruel, generous, or broken. His mother used to bring him leftover bread wrapped in napkins and say, "Eat slowly. Food tastes better when you respect the hands that made it." His father taught him another lesson. "Remember the back door," Dominic said. "If one day you enter through the front, do not forget who kept the building alive from behind." Dominic Vale was not soft. He had the hard patience of a man who scrubbed pots, learned accounts at night, saved coins, bought one motel with 2 partners, lost one partner, almost lost the motel, slept in the office, and worked until people who had laughed at him began asking for meetings. When Alexander was 16, the family finally became what newspapers later called new money. By 25, Alexander was helping run the company. By 34, he was CEO. By 38, he was a billionaire with a private plane, a penthouse, 3 homes he barely used, and more invitations than he had time to accept. But wealth did something strange to the people around him. It made them perform. People laughed too hard at his jokes, agreed too quickly with his opinions, praised things they had not seen, said yes when they meant no, said no only when they thought another billionaire might be listening. Dating became almost impossible. Some women liked him. Many liked what his name could do. He understood that, but understanding did not make loneliness smaller. His mother noticed. One evening, years before the restaurant incident, she found him standing alone on the balcony during one of his own charity galas. Below them, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne, and people dressed like generosity was a fashion requirement. Alina Vale stood beside him in a simple navy dress. She still refused to wear diamonds bigger than her wedding ring. "You look tired," she said. "I am fine." Mothers do not ask because they need information. We ask to give you permission to tell the truth. He smiled faintly. "I am tired. Of business. Of people pretending." She looked into the ballroom. Money is a loud instrument. It makes it hard to hear character. He turned to her. "What am I supposed to do? Test everyone?" "Yes," she said. He laughed. "You are serious." "Not with tricks, with observation. Watch how they treat people who cannot benefit them." She pointed toward a waiter balancing a tray of glasses. "That young man will tell you more about your guests than their speeches." Alexander never forgot that. His father died 3 years later. Heart failure, sudden and cruel, on a Monday morning after a board call. Alexander was left with the company, the empire, the expectations, the grief, and his mother's quiet eyes watching to see whether power would change him. It did change him. Power changes everyone. But Alexander fought to let it change his responsibilities more than his soul. He raised wages across company-owned hotels, created education funds for service workers' children, promoted internal staff instead of always hearing executives from outside. He built a reputation for being calm, exacting, and difficult to flatter. People respected him. Some feared him. Many wanted access. Victoria Ashford wanted more than access. She wanted the life. She came from old money that had thinned over generations but kept its manners polished. Her father had once owned a chain of private clubs. Her mother chaired boards, attended fundraisers, and spoke of charity like it was a family hobby. Victoria grew up with silver spoons, boarding schools, ski vacations, and the belief that certain people were born to sit while others were born to serve. She was beautiful. No one could deny that. Tall, elegant, golden-haired, with a voice like silk when she wanted something and a stare like ice when she did not get it. She knew how to enter a room and become the point of it. She knew which fork to use, which donor to flatter, which photographer to face, and how to speak about kindness in public without practicing it in private. Alexander met her at a museum benefit. She was standing beside a painting, speaking to an older patron about art restoration. Her words were intelligent. Her laugh was measured. When Alexander approached, she did not rush toward him like many people did. She let him come to her. That impressed him. At first, they talked about architecture, travel, and the problem of cities losing their old beauty to careless development. Victoria asked about his mother. She praised his father's story. She said she admired people who built things from nothing. Alexander wanted to believe her. Perhaps that was his weakness. Even wise people are not immune to wanting love to arrive in a beautiful form. Victoria was careful during their first months. She treated him warmly. She charmed his mother. She sent handwritten notes after dinners. She remembered names of executives, donors, and family friends. Around Alexander, she spoke kindly to staff. But kindness that appears only under supervision has a different smell. Alina sensed it first. One afternoon, Victoria came to tea at Elena's home. The housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, had worked for the Vale family for 21 years. She brought tea into the sitting room and accidentally placed Victoria's cup slightly too close to the edge of the table. Victoria smiled at Mrs. Alvarez and said, "Thank you." But after the housekeeper left, Victoria used a tissue to wipe the saucer, then whispered, "I do wish people in service were trained more carefully." Elena said nothing. She simply watched. Later, when Alexander came to collect Victoria, his mother walked him to the garden. "She is lovely," Alexander said. Elena touched a rose petal. "She is polished." "That is not the same." "No." He sighed, "Mama. I am not judging her." "You are." "Yes," she said calmly, but carefully. "What did she do?" Elena looked toward the window, where Victoria was laughing into her phone. She thanked Mrs. Alvarez with her mouth, then insulted her with her spirit. Alexander frowned. "That sounds poetic, not factual." "Character often does." He did not argue, but he did not listen enough. Over the next year, Victoria became part of his world. She attended galas beside him, appeared in articles, smiled in photographs. Her family loved the match. His board liked her polish. Society pages began calling her the future Mrs. Vale before he proposed. Alexander loved parts of her. That was the complicated truth. He loved her intelligence, her confidence, her elegance, her ability to understand rooms that bored him. He loved that she knew how to discuss art, wine, politics, and hotel design without sounding lost. But there were moments. Small moments. A driver opened the door too slowly, and her mouth tightened. A junior assistant mispronounced a guest's name, and Victoria laughed about it later. A hotel maid entered a suite before Victoria was ready, and Victoria demanded the woman be reassigned. Alexander noticed, then explained it away. She was stressed. She had high standards. She was raised differently. She was still learning the Vale way. People are very creative when they are trying not to see what love would make painful. The engagement happened in Monaco on a terrace above the sea. Victoria cried beautifully when he opened the ring box. Photographers captured the moment from a distance because Victoria's mother had somehow made sure the right people were nearby. Alexander should have been annoyed. Instead, he felt trapped by happiness. The ring was a rare emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Victoria posted a photograph of it with the caption, "Forever begins with grace." His mother called that evening. "Are you happy?" Elena asked. "I think so." She was silent. "Mama, I asked whether you are happy, not whether the answer looks correct." He looked out at the dark sea. "I want to be." That was honest. And sad. Wedding planning began immediately. Victoria wanted a ceremony at the Vale family's flagship hotel. 700 guests, white orchids, 3 gowns, a private performance by a famous singer, fireworks over the bay, a feature in a luxury magazine. Alexander agreed to most things because he did not care enough about flowers, napkin colors, or invitation paper to argue. But he cared about one thing. Before setting the official wedding date, he wanted one final private dinner with Victoria, his mother, and a few close friends at Luminara, a fine dining restaurant located inside a historic building owned by Vale Hospitality. Victoria did not know he owned the building. Not directly. The property was held under an old company name tied to his father's first expansion. It amused him sometimes, how people spoke differently when they did not realize his name was behind the walls. He chose Luminara for another reason too. His mother had quietly told him that 2 staff members from different Vale properties had complained about Victoria's behavior during wedding planning visits. Nothing dramatic enough to prove cruelty. Just tone, threats, sharpness, a florist in tears, a hotel coordinator asking not to be assigned to the wedding. Alexander confronted Victoria gently. She laughed. Darling, some people call anything firm a complaint. I do not like staff being afraid. I do not like incompetence. That is not the same thing. No, she said, kissing his cheek, but weak people often confuse the two. Weak people. The phrase stayed with him. So he watched. The night of the dinner, Luminara glowed under soft gold lights. It was the kind of restaurant where the chairs cost more than most people's beds, and the menu had no prices unless you asked for the private one. Floor to ceiling, windows looked out over the city. A pianist played near a wall of candles. Servers moved quietly like shadows trained in grace. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late in a white dress that looked like it had been poured onto her. She kissed Alexander's cheek and apologized to the table, but not to the staff who had delayed service waiting for her. Alina sat beside Alexander, wearing navy again. She watched everything. Amara, the waitress assigned to their table, approached with careful professionalism. She was young but not inexperienced. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her uniform was clean. Her smile was nervous but sincere. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Amara, and I will be taking care of you tonight." Victoria barely looked at her. Alexander did. "Good evening, Amara." Amara's shoulders loosened slightly. The dinner began well enough. Champagne. Small plates. Polite conversation. Victoria talked about wedding venues, guest lists, and how difficult it was to find vendors who understood true refinement. Alina asked quiet questions. Alexander answered only when needed. Halfway through the meal, Victoria ordered a sauce change for a dish already prepared. Amara apologized and said she would check with the kitchen. Victoria smiled tightly. Checking is not the same as solving. Amara nodded. "I understand, ma'am." Alexander noticed. Alina noticed him noticing. The dish was remade. Then Victoria complained the wine temperature was slightly wrong. Then she asked for a different napkin because the fold looked lazy. Then she requested that Amara stop saying ma'am because it made her feel old. Amara apologized each time. Alexander's chest tightened. He had seen enough rooms to know when someone was testing how much cruelty they could spend before being charged for it. Then the accident happened. A busboy rounded the corner too quickly, carrying a tray of water glasses. Amara shifted to avoid him while holding Victoria's tray. The tray tilted. A small dish of red sauce slipped, hit the edge of Victoria's plate, and splashed onto the front of her white dress. Amara gasped. The busboy froze. The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Amara immediately grabbed a napkin. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry, ma'am. Let me help." Victoria stood slowly. Her face changed into something Alexander had never seen so clearly. Not anger only. Pleasure. The pleasure of finally having permission to punish someone. "Do not touch me," Victoria said. Amara stepped back. The manager hurried over. And then Victoria began. The dress. The cost. The incompetence. The threat. The demand that Amara be fired. The words grew sharper, uglier, more revealing. Alexander sat still at first. Not because he approved. Because he wanted to see whether Victoria would stop herself. She did not. Then came the sentence. "You people always act so invisible until you ruin something expensive." Alina closed her eyes. Alexander's hand tightened around his water glass. Victoria dropped the napkin at Amara's feet. "Clean it." That was enough. Alexander stood. The room changed because everyone knew who he was, even if Victoria was too angry to remember where they were. "Please stand up," he told Amara. She stood. He told Victoria to apologize. She refused. He told the manager not to fire Amara. Victoria challenged him. Then he said he owned the building. For a moment, Victoria looked less like a queen and more like a child caught stealing from a purse. "Alexander," she whispered, "you never told me." "I know. You let me stand here without telling me you own this place." "Yes." "Why would you do that?" "To see whether ownership was the only thing that would make you behave." Her face went pale. People at nearby tables looked down, but not from shame now. From fascination. Victoria leaned closer. "Do not do this to me here." He looked at her. "You did it to Amara here." Her lips trembled, but Alexander knew her well enough to know it was not remorse yet. It was fear of public loss. "Alexander, I was upset." "Yes. She ruined my dress. And you revealed your character." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. There had been a time when those tears would have moved him immediately. That night they only made him sad. Because he finally understood his mother's warning. Money was loud. But cruelty was louder when you stopped excusing it. He turned to Amara. "I am sorry this happened to you." Amara shook her head quickly. "Sir, please, it was my fault. I should have." "No," he said gently. "An accident is not permission for humiliation." The busboy near the wall began crying silently. Alexander noticed. "You too," he said to him. "You are not losing your job over this." The boy nodded, wiping his face. The manager looked like he might collapse from relief. Victoria whispered, "Alexander, please." He turned back to her. "This engagement is paused." A soft gasp moved through the room. Victoria's hand flew to the ring. "Paused?" "Yes." "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious." Elena spoke for the first time. "Victoria, give the ring back." The words were quiet, but they had the weight of a door closing. Victoria stared at Elena. "You have always hated me." "No," Elena said. "I hoped I was wrong." Victoria looked around at the restaurant, the starring guests, Amara standing near the table, Alexander holding the velvet box, the life she had been planning beginning to slip through her fingers. Then anger returned. She pulled the ring from her finger and placed it on the table. Not gently. It clicked against the plate. "You will regret humiliating me." Alexander looked at Amara. Then at the busboy. Then at the manager. Then back at Victoria. "No," he said. "I will regret that I almost married someone who enjoyed humiliating others." Victoria grabbed her purse and walked out. No one followed. Not even her closest friend at the table, who suddenly seemed very interested in her wine glass. The restaurant stayed silent after she left. Alexander picked up the ring. Then he looked at the manager. "Close this table's bill. Every staff member working tonight receives a bonus. No one is to be punished for the accident." "Yes, Mr. Vale." He turned to Amara. "You may go home if you want." Amara shook her head, still trembling. "I need the shift." Alexander nodded. "I understand. Then take 10 minutes, sit, drink water. When you return, you will not serve this table, and tomorrow, if you are willing, I would like to speak with you about what happened." She looked terrified. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said, "someone else is." That was the beginning. But not only of Victoria's fall. It was also the beginning of Amara's rise. Amara Akafer had not planned to be a waitress forever. No child dreams first of carrying plates for people who refused to learn her name. She had once wanted to become a nurse. Her mother, Josephine, cleaned offices at night and cared for elderly neighbors during the day. Her father died when she was 12, leaving behind medical debts, unpaid rent, and a toolbox Amara's little brother, Toby, kept under his bed like treasure. Amara was the oldest. That meant childhood ended early. She helped with Toby, helped with bills, worked after school, studied at night, won a small scholarship to begin nursing classes, then paused when her mother got sick and money became a wall. Luminara was supposed to be temporary. Temporary work has a way of becoming life when poverty keeps extending the deadline. She was good at the job. Fast, polite, observant. She remembered allergies, anniversaries, favorite wines, which customers wanted conversation, which wanted silence, which men treated dates kindly only when servers were watching. She had served powerful people before. Some were kind. Some were careless. Some were cruel in quiet ways. But Victoria's humiliation had felt different. Because it was public. Because everyone watched. Because for one terrible moment, when the napkin hit the floor, Amara almost picked it up. Not because she believed she deserved it. Because she needed the job. That shame followed her home that night. Her mother was awake at the kitchen table, sorting pills into a plastic case. "You are late," Josephine said. Amara tried to smile. "Busy night. Mothers hear lies in the breathing." "What happened?" Amara sat down and told her. Not all at once. Piece by piece. The dress, the yelling, the napkin, the billionaire stepping in, the paused engagement. Josephine listened without interrupting. When Amara finished, her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "You did not lose dignity because someone tried to take it." Amara's eyes filled. "I almost picked up the napkin." "But you did not." "Only because he stopped me." Josephine squeezed her hand. "Then thank God someone remembered what the room forgot." The next day, Amara returned to Luminara expecting whispers. There were whispers, but not cruel ones. The busboy Matteo hugged her so hard she nearly dropped her bag. The manager apologized 6 times. The kitchen staff clapped when she entered, which made her cry and tell them to stop. At noon, Alexander Vale arrived. No photographers. No assistants. No dramatic entrance. Just a man in a dark suit carrying a small notebook. He asked to speak with Amara privately in the manager's office, with another staff representative present if she preferred. She asked Matteo to sit with her. Alexander approved immediately. That alone made her less afraid. "I want to apologize again," he said. "You already did." "Not enough." Amara did not know what to say. He continued. "Luminara operates in a building owned by one of my companies. While I do not manage the restaurant directly, I have influence here. Influence creates responsibility." Matteo looked stunned. Amara listened carefully. "I am conducting a review," Alexander said, "not only of last night, but of how service workers are treated in properties connected to my company. I would like to hear the truth, if you are willing to tell it." Amara almost laughed. The truth. Rich people rarely wanted the truth from workers. They wanted gratitude, smiles, and stories that ended before becoming inconvenient. But Alexander looked sincere. So she told him. Not only about Victoria. About guests who touched servers' arms without permission. Managers who apologized to customers before checking if staff were okay. Tips used as weapons. People who threatened jobs over tiny mistakes. Workers afraid to report abuse because replacement was always waiting. Matteo spoke too. So did the manager, eventually. Alexander wrote very little. Mostly he listened. At the end he said, "Thank you." Amara expected that to be the end. It was not. Within 1 month, every hospitality property under Vail ownership introduced a new staff dignity policy. Guests who abused workers could be removed, banned, or reported. Managers were required to support staff during guest conflicts. Incident reviews included worker testimony. Service employees received training not only in hospitality, but in rights, escalation, and protection. The policy had a name: the backdoor standard. When asked about it in an interview, Alexander said, "My father entered hotels through the back door long before he owned one. Every company forgets its soul when it forgets the people working there." The quote went viral. Victoria hated that. Her version of the story spread too, of course. She told friends Alexander had staged a cruel test, that Amara had been careless, that Alina had manipulated him, that billionaires could afford moral theater because they did not understand social pressure. Some people believed her. People often believe the version that lets them keep admiring cruelty wrapped in beauty. But more people believed what they saw. A video from another diner surfaced online. It did not show the entire incident, but it showed enough. Victoria pointing, Amara trembling, the napkin dropping, Alexander telling Amara to stand, the ring placed on the table. Within 48 hours, Victoria's social circle became nervous. Brands paused collaborations. Charity boards asked for space. Her mother called Alina furious. Her father called Alexander colder and more strategic. "Victoria made a mistake," Mr. Ashford said. Alexander stood in his office, looking out over the city. "No," he replied, "she revealed a pattern. You are ending an engagement over a waitress. I am ending it over character. You will damage both families." Then both families were too fragile. Mr. Ashford's voice hardened. "You sound like your father." Alexander smiled faintly. "Thank you." That ended the call. But the story did not end there. Because Victoria was not the only one whose life changed. 3 months after the incident, Alexander's mother invited Amara and her mother to lunch. Amara refused twice. The third time, Josephine said, "When life opens a strange door, at least look through it." So they went. Alina Vail did not host them in a palace-like dining room. She invited them to the smaller family kitchen at her home, where sunlight fell across wooden floors and a pot of stew simmered on the stove. Amara was nervous. Josephine was calm. Alina greeted Josephine like an equal. That made Amara trust her immediately. During lunch, Alina asked about Amara's life, not as charity but as interest. When Amara mentioned nursing school, Alina looked at Alexander. He nodded. Later, Alexander offered Amara a scholarship through the Vail Service Workers Education Fund. She almost said no. Pride stood up fast. "I do not want pity," she said. Alexander respected that. "This is not pity. It is policy. The fund existed before that dinner. You qualify because you work in hospitality and paused education for family care." Amara still hesitated. Alina leaned forward. "Child, sometimes help is not a chain. Sometimes it is a bridge. Learn the difference, then cross when you are ready." Amara accepted. 2 years later, she became a registered nurse. She chose pediatric care. Not because it was easy. Because children in hospitals reminded her of her brother when he was little, pretending not to be scared. At her graduation, Josephine cried so loudly that everyone around them laughed. Mateo came too, wearing a suit that did not fit but smiling like family. Alina sat in the second row. Alexander stood quietly near the back, applauding with the rest. Amara saw him after the ceremony. "You came," she said. "You earned it." She smiled. "Thank you for the scholarship. Thank you for telling the truth." For a moment they stood in silence. Then Amara said, "Did you ever speak to her again?" Alexander knew who she meant. "Victoria." "Yes," he said, "once." That meeting had happened 6 months after the restaurant incident. Victoria had requested it through lawyers, then friends, then finally his mother. Elena said, "Meet her if you need closure, not if she needs performance." So Alexander met Victoria in a quiet hotel garden. She arrived in a pale blue dress, softer than her usual style. No dramatic jewelry, no bright lipstick. She looked thinner but still beautiful. For the first 10 minutes, she performed regret. She said she had been humiliated. She said the video ruined her. She said people did not understand the pressure she was under. Alexander listened. Then asked, "Are you sorry for what you did to Amara or sorry it was seen?" Victoria's eyes filled with anger before tears. That was the answer. "I was raised with standards," she said. "No, you were raised with hierarchy. You loved me. I loved who I hoped you were." That hurt her. He saw it. He did not enjoy it. But he did not rescue her from it either. Victoria looked away. "You made me the villain." "No," Alexander said. "You mistreated someone with less power. The room saw it. I only refused to join you." She stood. "You will end up with someone ordinary." He smiled sadly. "If I am lucky." She left. He never saw her again. Years passed. The Luminara incident became one of those stories people told at dinner parties, often badly. Some made it about romance. Some made it about billionaires. Some made it about public scandal. Few told it correctly. Elena did. Whenever young executives asked her how to judge character, she said, "Watch the tray." They laughed. Then she explained. "Anyone can be gracious when the tray arrives perfectly. Watch what happens when it falls." Alexander never married quickly after Victoria. He dated sometimes carefully. He still attended galas, still ran companies, still entered rooms where people watched him like weather. But he became better at listening to small moments. A woman rude to a driver did not get a second date. A woman who ignored waitstaff did not get dessert. A woman who used charity language but treated assistants like furniture was politely thanked and never called again. Then, one rainy evening 4 years after the Luminara incident, Alexander visited a children's hospital funded partly by the Veil Foundation. He was there for a board tour. He hated tour. Tour often turned need into presentation. But this one mattered. The foundation had funded a family housing unit and a pediatric recovery garden. He wanted to see whether the money had done what the reports claimed. A nurse in blue scrubs walked into the playroom, carrying a stack of coloring books. She knelt beside a little boy with a bandaged arm and said, "You can pick 2, but if you pick the dinosaur one, I will be jealous." The boy smiled for the first time since Alexander entered the room. The nurse looked up. It was Amara. For a second they both froze. Then she stood, laughing softly. "Mr. Vale." "Amara, you look lost." "I often am on hospital tour." "Most donors are." He smiled. She had changed. Not completely. Her eyes were the same, warm, observant, careful, but the fear from the restaurant was gone. In its place was steadiness, purpose, a woman standing inside her own life. The hospital director came over, surprised they knew each other. Amara said, "We met at a restaurant." Alexander said, "She taught me something important." Amara raised an eyebrow. "I was carrying pasta." "Still important." After the tour, he asked if she wanted coffee in the hospital cafeteria. She laughed. A billionaire asking someone to cafeteria coffee. My father would haunt me if I acted too good for cafeteria coffee. She agreed. They sat near a window with terrible coffee and a vending machine humming beside them. The conversation was easy in a way Alexander had almost forgotten conversation could be. Amara talked about nursing, her mother's health, Matteo now managing staff training at Luminara, and her brother Toby studying engineering. Alexander talked about his mother, the company, and how difficult it was to build systems that outlived good intentions. Amara listened without flattering him. That felt rare. Before they parted, he said, "I am glad you became what you wanted." She smiled. "I became it late. Late is still a rival." She looked at him carefully. "That sounds like something your mother would say." "It is." They became friends first. That mattered. No grand romance, no sudden rescue, no fairy tale where kindness earns a billionaire like a prize. Amara had no interest in being someone's proof of humility. Alexander had no interest in turning gratitude into affection. They met for coffee sometimes. Then lunch. Then long walks after hospital fundraisers. Elena noticed, of course. Mothers notice before people admit things to themselves. One evening, she found Alexander smiling at his phone. "Is that Amara?" she asked. He looked up. "You are too observant." "I am old. We turn observation into sport." "She is a friend." Elena smiled. "Good. Friendship is where love can tell the truth before it dresses up." He shook his head. "You always speak like a proverb. And yet you keep needing them." Amara was cautious too. When Josephine learned Alexander had become part of her daughter's life, she folded laundry very slowly and asked, "Does he see you, or does he see the story of you?" Amara frowned. "What does that mean?" "Some people love what they did for you more than they love you." That sentence stayed with her. So she watched. Alexander never brought up the scholarship as leverage. Never acted like her success belonged to him. Never sent gifts so large they felt like pressure. Never treated her mother like a charity case. When he visited Josephine, he ate what she served and helped wash dishes without making it a performance. When Amara had to cancel dinner because a child patient took a bad turn, he did not complain. He sent food to the nurse's station for the whole shift and texted, "Eat when you can." No reply needed. That was when Amara began to trust him. Love came slowly. Respect first. Then laughter. Then silence that felt safe. Their first public appearance together caused noise. Of course it did. Society pages loved circles, and this one looked too perfect for them to resist. Billionaire scene with former waitress from famous broken engagement incident. Former waitress. As if that was her name. Alexander wanted to shut it down aggressively. Amara stopped him. "I was a waitress," she said. "There is no shame in work." "I know." Then let them say it, but they should also say nurse. So he did. When asked about her at a charity event, Alexander said, "Amara Akafer is a pediatric nurse, a scholar, a daughter, a sister, and one of the strongest people I know. If the most interesting thing someone can say about her is that she once served tables, they have not learned how to see people." The quote spread. Amara pretended to be annoyed. She was not. Years after the night at Luminara, Alexander took Amara back there. Not for a proposal. Not yet. Just dinner. The restaurant had changed. New curtains, new menu, same windows, same piano corner. Matteo, now assistant manager, greeted them at the door with a smile wide enough to split his face. I saved the best table, he said. Amara looked toward the center of the room. Not that one. Matteo laughed. No, never that one. They sat near the window. Halfway through dinner, a young server spilled water near the table, not on anyone, just close enough to panic. The girl froze. Amara immediately reached for napkins. It is okay, she said. No one is hurt. Alexander watched her. Not because he was surprised. Because he was grateful. The server looked close to tears. Amara smiled. Breathe, water dries, shame lasts longer. We are not doing shame tonight. The girl laughed shakily. After she left, Alexander said, You healed the room faster than I ever could. Amara shrugged. I know what it feels like to stand there. He reached across the table and took her hand. That was when he knew. Not because the moment was dramatic. Because it was ordinary and true. Months later, he proposed in Alina's garden with Josephine, Toby, Matteo, and a few close friends nearby. No hidden photographers, no magazine arrangement, no fireworks, no performance. The ring was not Victoria's ring. That one had been returned to a vault and eventually sold for charity. Amara's ring was smaller, warmer, with a stone chosen because it reminded Alexander of sunlight through honey. Before he opened the box, he said, You owe me nothing, not because of the scholarship, not because of Luminara, not because of anything that came before. I am asking because I love the woman you are, not the story people tell about you. Amara cried. Josephine cried. Alina pretended not to cry and failed. Amara said yes. Their wedding was nothing like the one Victoria had planned. 200 guests. Not 700. Flowers from a local grower. Food from family recipes, and the hotel kitchen working together. Service workers from Vale Properties were invited not to serve, but to sit, eat, dance, and celebrate if they wished. At the reception, Alexander gave a short speech. My father told me never to forget the back door. My mother told me to watch how people treat those who cannot benefit them. Years ago, in a restaurant, I saw cruelty clearly. I also saw Grace standing in a uniform, trying not to cry. I did not know then that Grace would become my future. Amara shook her head, embarrassed. But she smiled. Then she spoke too. I used to think dignity was something people with power could take from you. I was wrong. They can attack it. They can test it. They can make a room forget it for a moment, but they cannot own it unless you surrender it. That night, someone reminded me to stand. Since then, I have learned to stand for myself. Alina raised her glass. Josephine said loudly, Amen. Everyone laughed. Not all endings are perfect. Victoria did not become poor and miserable in a tower somewhere. Life is rarely that poetic. She eventually married a man from another wealthy family. People said she became quieter after the scandal. Some said kinder. Some said only more careful. Alexander never tried to find out which was true. That was no longer his story. Luminara remained open, but under a new ownership agreement requiring staff protection standards. The backdoor standard became part of Vale Hospitality's public identity. Other companies copied it. Some sincerely, some because customers liked the sound of it. Either way, workers gained language and protection they had not had before. Matteo built a career in hospitality management. Amara became head nurse of a pediatric recovery unit. Josephine's health improved enough for her to start a small catering business from home, which Alina secretly ordered from too often and pretended not to. Alina became a grandmother figure to half the hospital children, arriving with books and leaving with drawings taped inside her car. Alexander remained wealthy, powerful, watched. But he was less lonely. That mattered more than the money. Years later, Amara and Alexander returned to Luminara with their little daughter, Grace. She was 3, curious, and deeply interested in dropping spoons. A server accidentally spilled juice near her chair and apologized quickly. Grace looked at the puddle, then at her mother, then at the server. "It dries," she said proudly. Amara laughed. Alexander covered his face. The server smiled. "Yes, it does." That was how lessons continue. Not always through speeches. Sometimes through a child learning that accidents are not crimes, that workers are not furniture, that money does not make anyone more human than anyone else, that the person carrying the tray deserves the same respect as the person paying the bill. And that character is revealed in the small moment before anyone has time to pretend. People still tell the story of the billionaire who stepped in when his fiancée humiliated a waitress. But to Amara, that was not the true center of the story. The true center was not Alexander's money, not Victoria's fall, not the ring placed on the table, not the video, not the headlines. The true center was the moment she stood upright, the moment she did not pick up the napkin, the moment a room that had almost accepted cruelty was forced to remember her humanity. Alexander stepped in, yes, but Amara stood. And sometimes that is where a life begins again. So if you ever find yourself in a room where someone powerful tries to make you feel small, remember this. Their voice may be loud. Their dress may be expensive. Their friends may laugh. Their money may open doors. But none of that makes them greater than you. Stand if you can. Breathe if you cannot. Remember that work is not shame. Need is not shame. Accidents are not shame. Being poor is not shame. Serving others is not shame. The shame belongs to the person who uses power to humiliate. And if you are ever the one watching, do not be the silent table. Do not be the person who looks down at the plate. Do not wait for a billionaire to do what ordinary courage can do. Say something. Lift someone. Refuse the cruelty. Because a room changes the moment one person decides dignity matters more than comfort. That night at Luminara, Victoria thought the stain on her dress was the disaster. She was wrong. The real stain was on her character. And unlike sauce on silk, that kind does not wash out easily. Alexander saw it. The restaurant saw it. And Amara, the waitress Victoria tried to shame, walked out of that night not broken but seen. Years later, when people asked Alexander why he ended an engagement over one dinner, he always gave the same answer. It was not one dinner, it was one window. Then if Amara was beside him, she would add softly, "And some windows save you from entering the wrong house."